welcome to my channel. My name is Ruby and I make sewing patterns, and today we're going to be making my Carmen Bow closure skirt design. This is a zipper-free pattern. I know everybody hates sewing zippers, so this is my solution for that. It uses two bows as the closure, but also a hook and eye to keep your panties from showing. You'll find the link for the pattern at the first link down below. It's a print-at-home pattern. I'll show you how to the print settings and how to put it together and everything. It's for sizes 0 to 16, and there's 10 different length options, so you can make it as long or as short as you'd like. Yeah, please like and subscribe, and if you need any help, comment down below or DM me on Etsy. Yeah, all my other patterns are linked down below as well. Let's just get into the tutorial. The print settings for this pattern should be scale 100% and double-sided off. You can use A4 or letter size paper to print, just be sure to set the scale to 100%. This pattern is compatible with Adobe Acrobat, and using Acrobat allows you to print only your desired size. You'll open the layers option and deselect all the other sizes, just don't select the alignment borders or the details. If you're printing from Adobe Acrobat, I like to use the posters setting. Once you've printed, you'll trim the pieces along the outside of their borders, and then match them up and tape them together border to border as shown. Then, you'll cut each of the individual pattern pieces out in your size. You should have the waist ties piece, the center front waistband, the side front waistband, the back waistband, side front gathers, back gathers, and the center front gathers. You'll need to cut the gathers pieces to your desired length. There's a chart that helps you find the right length in the info package that came with the pattern files. Each of your pieces has a grain line. When you're placing your pattern pieces, the grain line should be parallel to the selvage edge. The selvage edge is the one that the fabric wasn't cut at. That would be the cut edge. So always place your pattern pieces with the grain line parallel to the selvage edge. With the pieces that say cut to self, place them on 2 layers of fabric and pin through both layers. Again, grain line parallel to the selvage. Cut them out. I use a rotary cutter, but fabric scissors are fine. Then you'll need to snip every notch on your pieces. This just means cut a 1/4 inch mark where the notches are indicated. Cut through both layers. When you take out the pins and lift the pattern, you'll have 2 pieces. Use this same method for the back waistband and the side front waistband pieces. Then, for your side front gathers and the center front gathers, you'll only need to cut through 1 layer of fabric, but remember your notches here as well. And finally, for the back gathers, you'll need to cut this piece on a fold. So with your fabric folded, so there are 2 layers of fabric, place the fold grain line arrows right up against the fold line. Pin the piece in place and cut through the 2 layers, but don't cut that fold. Snip all of your notches, and when you unfold it, you'll have a piece double the size of the pattern piece. I'm marking all of my pattern pieces here so you know the wrong side and the right side of your pieces, which you can keep track of by looking at the notches and comparing your notches to what you see on the screen. For my side front and center front waistband pieces though, there are 2 of each of them and their right sides are opposite. You can see here that it's the same 2 pieces, but one side says wrong and the other says right. And when you flip them over, one says right and the other says wrong. That's only for the side front waistband and the center front waistband pieces. If you have fusible interfacing, you can cut the interfacing with the glue side matching the wrong side of all the waistband pieces and fuse the interfacing for extra support. If you don't want to do that or you don't know what interfacing is, just ignore this, you don't really need it. Okay, so let's actually put these together. Take your back waistband pieces and place them with the right sides up. Then take your side front pieces and identify the side seam on these pieces. This is the side without the notches. You're going to place the side front waistband piece and the back waistband piece together, right sides facing. You'll match them up at the side seams. Do the same for the opposite side front piece. Pin them together at the side seam and sew them together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to do the same thing with the center front waistband pieces. placing them right sides facing with the back waistband, matching them at their side seams, which you can identify because they're the sides without the notches. You pin them here, and as you did before, sew them together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now you'll take these pieces to your iron and press open each of the seams. Moving on to our gathers, we're going to finish the edges of our fabric. We're just going to be doing this at the side seams to start. You can use your serger here, but if you don't have one, you'll use a zigzag stitch along the edge. You do this so the fabric doesn't fray. You're doing this to the sides of the center front gathers, the side front gathers, and the back gathers, only along their sides. Now we're going to place down our back gathers with the right sides facing up. Then you take your center front gathers and place them on top of the back gathers with the right sides facing. You're going to match them up on the side of the front gathers that doesn't have these notches. This is your side seam. Pin them together here and join them using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Open the pieces and press the seam open using your iron. Now on the other end of your back gathers, you'll place the side front gathers with the right sides facing. And again, at the side that doesn't have those notches, you'll pin them together and join them using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then you'll press that seam open. Now we're going to be creating the gathers. To do this, you'll be placing 2 base stitches across the top of each of your gathers pieces. You could just place 2 stitches across the entirety of all 3 pieces, but to prevent any errors, I'm going to show you how to do this for each individual piece. So starting with the side front gathers piece, we're going to take this to our sewing machine. Take a scrap piece of fabric and stitch into it a few times. Then lift your needle, lift your presser foot, and pull the fabric away from the machine. You're pulling out the bobbin thread and the top thread. Trim off the threads so you have 2 long threads coming from your machine. Pull these threads under your presser foot and behind your machine. Take your side front gathers piece and place the top right corner under your presser foot. You're going to change the machine settings to be a base stitch. I can't say that word. Base stitch, so the longest stitch that your machine will allow. With those threads still behind your machine, begin to stitch along the top of the side front gathers piece using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Come right up to the edge, and just before you stitch into that next piece, stop, lift your needle, lift your presser foot, and pull the piece away, leaving 5 inches of thread on the piece and 5 inches of thread on the sewing machine. Tuck those threads back again and repeat this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You should have 2 parallel rows of stitching. Now we'll move on to that back gathers piece. Starting where we left off, on the beginning of the back gathers piece, repeat those steps, stitching using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then doing it again using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving thread hanging off the fabric and the machine each time. Now do the same for the last piece, the center front gathers. 2 rows, leaving the threads hanging off each time. Okay, so essentially what we want to do is pull these threads so the fabric matches the length of the waistband piece. So find your waistband piece that is in the same order as the gathers. So you can see here, they're both facing the wrong sides up, and the side front pieces are on the right and the center front pieces are both on the left. The other waistband you can just disregard for now. Let's do the gathers. I like to tuck the threads I'm not working with aside so I don't accidentally pull on them, so I've clipped them away here. Focusing on the side front piece here, turn the waistband upside down with the right side facing up. Now we want those gathers to stop after those notches on the right, so I put a pin in them. Now I'm taking the top 2 threads on the left side and making sure not to pull those bottom threads at all. You'll pull the top 2 threads and begin gathering the fabric like this, just inching it towards your pin. Then you'll adjust those gathers so they've been evenly dispersed and you can match up the side seams. It's important that the fabric on the underside is laid flat and there's no puckering. You're making the gathers match that fabric, so don't let the fabric fold over or pucker or anything. Take your time adjusting so the gathers are evenly dispersed. Then use as many pins as you need to keep the gathers in place and the edges of the waistband and the gathers pieces flush at the top. Make sure your gathers come right up to the side seams pin. Check on the back that your fabric is laid flat, and then we'll move on to the next pieces. I like to clip those threads we just finished with away. Now we're working with those back gathers and the back waistband with the right sides facing. We're going to gather the piece so you can match each of the notches up with the waistband notches. So this notch to this notch to this notch, this notch to this notch, and this side seam to this side seam. I clip those threads that we're not working with away there, and I pin the middle notch of the back pieces together. Same as before, you'll pull on those top threads, gathering the fabric from the right side first. Evenly disperse the gathers and be sure to match up those notches using a pin. Then add as many pins as you'd like to place the gathers right up to that side seam. Now you'll do that exact same thing starting from the left side, matching up the notches and evenly dispersing the gathers, then matching up to the side seams. Now, moving to the center front pieces, I clip those used threads away and begin gathering the fabric from the right side until those two notches match up. Pin the notches together and evenly disperse those gathers. This is just a bunch of extra footage trying to show you what you do. So I gathered up to that notch on the right side, and now I'm pulling from the left side until I hit that notch, gathering that center area, and then placing my pins so the gathers are dispersed all nicely. And now I'm doing this on the left side, but you see like the inch there where those two notches are, you're gonna match those notches and no gathers past those notches. They should be perfectly together. Okay, now that that's done, check the back of your waistband to make sure that none of the fabric has been folded or puckered. And now we're going to sew the gathers and the waistband together along the top here. Be sure you've gone back to a regular stitch length. You need to do this slowly, so be sure you're actually sewing over the gathers and not just pushing them away using the presser foot. So super slowly, using a 1/2 inch seam allowance with the gathers facing up, you'll seam together all across the top until the end. When you're done, it should look like this with no puckering on the waistband side. We need to remove the baste stitches, so grabbing the threads that you gathered with, you'll pull them out until they're out of the fabric. If they break, you might need to seam rip them out. We're going to finish the seam using a zigzag stitch along all the top of this seam allowance. Unfold the pieces. You're going to bring this to your iron and press the seam open with the seam allowance facing upwards towards the waistband. The seam should look super crisp with the hem allowance on the back facing upwards towards the waistband. Now we're working with the other waistband pieces. You're going to be finishing the bottom along the edge using a zigzag stitch. Now bring back your gathers and waistband piece and place your waistbands together with right sides facing. Pin the waistbands together along the top, being sure to accurately line up those side seams. Use as many pins as you'd like. Now we're going to sew them together along the top using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Before you step away from your machine, we're going to return to those side seams and do an extra reinforcement stitch right over top of the original stitch line that you just did. And you'll just do this for both of the side seams. Before we move on to stitching the sides of the waistbands, we need to make these. These are our little like ribbon bow strap things that you're going to use to close the skirt. You have an option of not making these and just using ribbon, but I'll show you how to make them. You're taking the 4 22-inch long and 1¼ inch wide strips that you cut out using the pattern. You can use a bias tape maker if you have one, but assuming you don't, you'll fold over one side of the fabric strips just about 1/4 inch and press them like this all the way across. Then you'll do that again for the other side, folding them so that they meet up but they don't overlap, and press it just like this all the way across. Now you'll take that strip and fold it in half, pressing it in half like that. Now we're going to take it to our machine and stitch the fold shut along the very edge of the strip. You'll need 4 of these 22-inch straps. But starting with 2 of them, you'll take the skirt and at the center front side, opening the waistband pieces, place one strip right where the seam that closes the waistband pieces together is. Then you'll place the other strip at the center of that notch that's down there. Just along the edge, we're going to stitch each of these in place here, just using a regular stitch. Now we're going to fold that waistband piece back over, hiding the straps, but you're going to be sure that they remain in the same place, with that top strap right at the top seam. And the second strap sticking straight out from where you placed it. We're going to stitch over the straps, closing the side of the waistband pieces using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You'll also come back to the straps and do reinforcement stitches over where you just stitched, just to keep those straps in place. Now trim that corner off, but don't snip where you've stitched. This is just to reduce bulk in that corner. Now onto the other side, the side front pieces. You'll stitch those waistband pieces together as you did with the others, but just without those ties. Exactly the same, using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Like you did before, snip off the corner of that piece. Now fold over the whole thing so that the right sides of the front gathers are facing and match them up at the side seams. You're going to match at the notches that are 2 inches below where the gathers start on the side front gathers and the center front gathers. Pin the skirt all along the side and starting from the bottom, stitch up to the notch. And sorry, I don't know why I don't have footage of this, but when you get up to the notch, backstitch twice and then forward twice and then backstitch again and then forward again and then backstitch one more time and then end the stitch there at the notch. Now you'll press that seam open, but while you're doing that, you're going to continue that pressing all the way up there. So you're pressing this fabric here a 1/2 inch, just like the seam below it. You want that stitch line there to be pressed up. That's your main priority, is just making sure that that stitch line is pressed up on both sides, like this. Now fold open the waistband. You're going to take this seam allowance fabric here and press it down towards the gathers all the way around. When you're nearing those corners that we've sewn, don't worry, just continue to press as close to that as you can. You don't need to go right up to the very corner or anything. Now you'll pull those straps that you've sewn in so that the corner is pointed out, and then at the other corner, you'll take a pointed tool or some scissors and just point out that corner as best as you can. Make it as sharp as possible. Now with the inside of the skirt facing up, you're going to press the waistband seam so that the seam is rolled over to one side just slightly. You want it to roll so there's no visible seam on the right side of the garment, but the seam is fully visible on the inside of the skirt. You'll do this all the way around, including the corner and down the sides of the waistband. Press it so it's crisp and there are no visible seams on the right side of the skirt. Now you have some options here, but basically we're going to place a stitch along here and here. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, but you could also use an edge stitch. I'm starting from the top corner of the center front waistband piece, backstitching in one place a few times back and forth, and then continuing the stitch a 1/4 inch away, again optional. I usually do an edge stitch. I don't know why I switched it up here, but I'm doing this heading down. Be sure that this spot here, that the back side of this waistband part is well tucked under. If you're not sure to like really tuck it under, it'll show when you wear the skirt. So really push it under there, and continuing down, when I'm nearing the end, I'm coming right up to where the pieces meet, and at the end there, with my needle down, I lift the presser foot and turn the skirt 90 degrees. I stitch over the seam where the pieces meet, once forward, then back, forward again, back, and forward once more to further secure that seam. Then, turning 90 degrees again, I begin to stitch upwards towards the side front waistband. Again, be sure you're tucking the underside of that waistband very well, and when you hit the end, front and back stitch a few times. Optionally, you could continue the seam all the way around the top of the waistband. I did that here. You don't have to stitch all the way across the top like this, but I think it looks really nice. You just pivot the fabric again, and then continue this top stitch all the way around the top of the waistband. Oh, and this is what it looks like when you edge stitch instead of using a 1/4 inch seam allowance like I did on the muslin. So you can choose whatever you think looks best. I think that the pink one looks better than what I just showed you, but whatever. Now we're gonna stitch that loose waistband piece on the inside down. But to do that accurately, I recommend that you do a base stitch where the seams meet, because you'll have to do this stitch blind without being able to see the underside, and this just prevents you messing that up. So I'm going to be placing those 5mm long stitch based stitches at the seams here and the seams over here. Switching to my based stitch here, I'm placing the waistband under the presser foot and lining up the waistband seams and the gather seams as best I can. Then I put the presser foot down near the bottom of the waistband and I place a stitch across the seams, just to hold it in place temporarily. I do this a second time, but a little bit above it there. Then I move to the next waistband seam and I do the same thing, lining up those seams and basting them in place twice. From here, I'm going to do some top stitching along the bottom of the waistband. Backstitch and then go very slowly so your seam looks professional and the waistband fabric on the opposite side doesn't move too much. I'm constantly lifting it and checking under the fabric to make sure that everything is in place. Backstitch when you reach the end, and now you'll remove your base stitches using a seam ripper. We need to add the ties to the side front waistband. So using the ties on the center front waistband as a guide by placing the side front waistband on top of it, 1 inch out from the bottom of the tie, make a small mark using a pencil or a fabric marker. I'd actually recommend that you use a bit more than 1 inch, like maybe 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches. This just gives you some more room if you think the skirt could possibly be too big for you. But anywhere between 1 inch and 1.5 inches, make a small mark, and you'll do the same for the top strap, marking along the top. Actually, place that dot a little bit higher than that. I correct it in a second. Taking the other 2 ties that you've made, place one of them at the top, a 1/4 inch past the mark that you've made, with the length of the strip facing away from the corner. This is where we're going to be stitching straight down from the dot that we placed. Do the same for the mark below, placing the strap just above and a 1/4 inch past the dot that you've made. I'm adding some more pencil here so that you can understand the goal. We're stitching in this line, but only on the strap. Just watch, it'll make sense in a second. I'm going back and forth here a bunch of times, and then you see it's in line with that dot, but it's only on the actual tie itself, a 1/4 inch away from the start of that tie. Now we're gonna fold the tie over itself, closing off that like raw end. And we're gonna stitch it down a 1/4 inch away from the fold, stitching only on the tie itself. Repeat all of those steps for the tie just below it, and remember to put that tie just above the little dot that you made. Hey, sorry the footage here is going to be so bad, but on the inside of your skirt here, we're going to place a hook and eye. So on the bottom of the inner waistband here, you're going to take a little ruler and mark 3/4 of an inch away from the edge along that loose seam allowance from the inside waistband piece. 3/4 of an inch, one little dot away, ignoring that dot that I have there. This is the dot that you actually want to have. So we're going to be placing the hook part of our hook and eye at this dot we've just made, which will look like this. I'll link down below some tutorials of how to stitch in a hook and eye, because honest to God, my hand sewing is so bad, I don't want to show you that, but I'll link a tutorial for that down below if you need the help. But on the piece across from it, we're going to put the eye over there. It's going to hang off the edge of the side front piece on the inside of the skirt. And you're going to make sure you're sewing into the seam allowance and not into the front of the skirt. You're only using that loose seam allowance directly across from your hook with the eye hanging just off the edge a tiny little bit on the side front piece. So you see my little eye is hanging off the edge there, and then when you pull it over to that hook, it's able to just hook right on, and it keeps your underwear from showing when you're wearing this skirt, because it's kind of hard not to use a zipper, to be honest. Now you're almost done. You just need to finish the hem. I'm going to show you your options here. You can either zigzag or serge all along the edge and then press the hem up either an inch or an inch and a half with your iron, whatever you like, and then stitch the hem down all the way around like I did on this skirt. Or you can press the raw hem up a 1/4 inch and then press it up again another 1/2 inch or inch, whatever you'd like, and then stitch that down all the way around like I did for these shorts. Either way, whatever hem you choose, you're finally done. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this went well for you. Yeah, remember that you can comment down below if you have any questions or need any help with anything, or DM me on Etsy. Yeah, hope your skirt looks so freaking cute. That's all I've got for you, okay? Thanks, bye!